All right. We are on page 103. It's chapter Genetics 101. Here we go. Both sides of Dad's family were Jews from Russia and Poland. Pop-Pop's grandparents fled from the pogroms and ended up in NYC at the turn of the century. Tata's parents fled from the Nazis and ended up in Argentina in the 40s. Papa and Tata met at a dance on the Lower East Side while she was in town visiting a cousin. When they got married, moved to Bayside, and had Dad and Uncle Ben. Mom's side of the family is from Brazil, except for her mother, my beautiful grands, and her dad, Augusto, who died before I was born. The rest of Mom's family, all her glamorous aunts, uncles, and cousins, still live in Alto Leblon, a ritzy suburb south of Rio. Grands and Augusto moved to Boston in the early 60s and had Mom and Aunt Kate, who's married to Uncle Porter. Mom and Dad met at Brown University and had been together ever since. Isabel and Nate, like two peas in a pod. They moved to New York right after college, had me a few years later, then moved to a brick townhouse in North River Heights, the hippie stroller capital of the upper Manhattan, when I was about a year old. Not one person in the exotic mix of my family gene pool has ever shown any obvious signs of having what Augusta has. I've pored over Granny's grainy sepia pictures of long dead relatives and babushkas, black and white snapshots of distant cousins in crisp white linen suits, soldiers in uniform, ladies with beehive hairdos, Polaroids of a bell-buttoned teenagers and long-haired hippies, and not once have I been able to detect even the slightest trace of August's face in their faces. Not a one. But after August was born, my parents underwent genetic counseling. They were told that August had what seemed to be a previously unknown type of mandibulofacial dyssynostosis caused by an autosomal recessive mutation in the TCOF1 gene, which is located on chromosome 5, complicated by a hemifacial microsomia characteristic of OAV spectrum. Whew. Sometimes these mutations occur during pregnancies. Sometimes they're inherited from one parent carrying the gene. Sometimes they're caused by an interaction of many genes, possibly in combination with environmental factors. This is called multifactorial inheritance. In August's case, the doctors were able to identify one of the single nucleotide deletion mutations that made war on his face. The weird thing is, though you'd never know it from looking at them, both my parents carry the gene, and I do too. If I have children, there's a 1 in 2 chance that I will pass on the defective gene to them. That doesn't mean they'll look like August, but that they'll carry the gene that got double dosed in August that helped make him the way he is. If I marry someone who has the same defective gene, there's a 1 in 2 chance that our kids will carry the gene and look totally normal, a 1 in 4 chance that our kids will not carry the gene at all, and a 1 in 4 chance that our kids will look like August. If August has children with someone who doesn't have a trace of the gene, there's a 100% probability that their kid will inherit the gene, but a 0% chance that their kids will have a double dose of it like August, which means they'll carry the gene no matter what, but they could look totally normal. If he marries someone who has the gene, their kids will have the same odds as my kids. This only explains the part of August that's explainable. There's the other part of his genetic makeup that's not inherited, but just incredibly bad luck. Countless doctors have drawn little tic-tac-toe grids for my parents over the years to explain the genetic lottery to them. Geneticists use that Punnett square to determine inheritance, recessive and dominant genes, probabilities, and chance. But for all they know, there's more they don't know. They can try to forecast the odds, but they can't guarantee them. They use terms like germline mosaicism, chromosome rearrangement, or delayed mutation to explain why their science is not an exact science. I actually like how doctors talk. I like the sound of science. I like how words you don't understand explain things you don't understand. There are countless people under words like germline, mosaicism, chromosomal rearrangement, or delayed mutation. Countless babies who will never be born, like mine. Page 107, Out with the Old. Miranda and Ella blasted off. They attached themselves to a new crowd destined for high school glory. After a week of painful lunches where all they would do is talk about people that didn't interest me, I decided to make a clean break. They asked no questions. I told no lies. We just went our separate ways. I didn't even mind after a while. I stopped going to lunch for about a week. To make the transition easier, to avoid the fake, oh shoot, there's no room for the table at you, Olivia, it was just easier to go to the library and read. I finished War and Peace in October. It was amazing. People think it's such a hard read, but it's really just a soap opera with lots of characters, people falling in love, fighting for love, dying for love. I want to be in love like that someday. I want my husband to love me the way Prince Andrei loves Natasha. I ended up hanging out with a girl named Eleanor who I'd known from my days at PS 22, though we'd gone to different middle schools. Eleanor had always been a really smart girl. A little bit of a crybaby back then, but nice. I never realized how funny she was. Not laugh out loud daddy funny, but full of great quips. And she never knew how lighthearted I could be. Eleanor, I guess, had always been under the impression that I was very serious. And as it turns out, she's never liked Miranda and Ella. She thought that they were kind of stuck up. I gained entry through Eleanor to the smart kids table at lunch. It was a larger group than I'd been accustomed to hanging out with, and a more diverse crowd. It included Eleanor's boyfriend, Kevin, who would definitely become class president someday, a few techie guys, girls like Eleanor, who were members of the yearbook committee and the debate club, and a quiet guy named Justin, who had small round glasses and played violin, and who I had an instant crush on. When I'd see Miranda and Ella, who were now hanging out with the popular set, we'd play, hey, what's up, and move on. Occasionally, Miranda would ask me how August was doing and then say, tell him I say hello. This I never did, not despite Miranda, but because August was in his own world these days. These were the times at home that we never crossed paths. Page 109, October 31st. Grant had died the night before Halloween. Since then, even though it's been 4 years, this has always been a sad time of year for me. For Mom too, though she doesn't always say it. Instead, she immerses herself in getting August's costume ready, since we all know Halloween is his favorite time of the year. This year was no different. August really wanted to be a Star Wars character called Boba Fett, so Mom looked for a Boba Fett costume in August's size, which strangely enough was out of stock everywhere. She went to every online store, found a few on eBay that were going for an outrageous amount, and finally ended up having to buy a Jango Fett costume that she then converted into a Boba Fett costume by painting it green. I would say in all, she must have spent 2 weeks working on the stupid costume. And no, I won't mention the fact that Mom has never made any of my costume because it really has no bearing on anything at all. The morning of Halloween, I woke up thinking about Grands, which made me really sad and weepy. Dad kept telling me to hurry up and get dressed, which just stretched me out even more, and suddenly I started crying. I just wanted to stay home. So Dad took August to school that morning, and Mom said I could stay home, and the two of us cried together for a while. One thing I knew for sure. However much I missed Grands, Mom must have missed her more. All those times that August was clinging to life after a surgery, all those rushed trips to the ER, Grant had always been there for Mom. It felt good to cry with Mom. For both of us. At some point, Mom had the idea of watching The Ghost and Mrs. Muir together, which was one of our all-time favorite black and white movies. I agreed that this was a great idea. I think I probably would have used this weeping session as an opportunity to tell Mom about everything that was going on with school and Miranda and Ella, but just as we were sitting down in front of the DVD player, the phone rang. It was the nurse from August's school calling to tell Mom that August had a stomach ache and he should be picked up. So much for old movies and mother-daughter bonding. Mom picked August up, and the moment he came home, he went straight to the bathroom and threw up. Then he went to the bed and pulled his covers over his head. Mom took his temperature, brought him some tea, and assumed that August's mom role again. Via's mom, who had come out for a little while, was put away. I understood, though, August was in bad shape. Neither of us asked why he had worn his bleeding scream costume to school instead of the Boba Fett costume Mom had made for him. If it had annoyed Mom to see the costume she had worked on for 2 weeks tossed aside on the floor, she didn't show it. Page 111, Trick or Treat. August said he wasn't feeling well enough to go trick-or-treating later in the afternoon, which was sad for him because I know how much he loved to trick-or-treat, especially after it got dark outside. Even though I was well beyond the trick-or-treating stage of my life, I usually threw on some mask or something to accompany him up and down the blocks, watching him knock on people's doors, giddy with excitement. I knew it was the one night a year where he could truly be like every other kid. No one knew he was different under the mask. To August, that must have felt amazing. At about 7 o'clock, I knocked on his door. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he said back. He wasn't using his PlayStation or reading a comic. He was just laying in bed, looking at the ceiling. Daisy, as always, was next to him on the bed, her head draped over his leg. The bleeding screen costume was crumpled up on the floor next to the Boba Fett costume. "How's your stomach?" I said, sitting next to him on the bed. "I'm still nauseous." "You sure you're not up for the Halloween parade?" "Positive." This surprised me. Usually, August was such a trooper about his medical issues, whether it was skateboarding a few days after a surgery or sipping food through a straw when his mouth was practically bolted shut. This was a kid who's gotten more shots, taken more medication, put up with more procedures by his age than most people would have to put up in 10 lifetimes. And he was sidelined from a little nausea? "You want to tell me what's up?" I said, sounding a little bit like Mom. "No." "Is it school?" "Yes." "Teachers, schoolwork, friends?" He didn't answer. "Did someone say something?" "People always say something," he answered bitterly. I could tell he was close to crying. "Tell me what happened," I said. And he told me what happened. He had overheard some very mean things some boys were saying about him. He didn't care what the other boys had said. He expected that. But he was hurt the most by one of the boys, his best friend, Jack Will. I remember him mentioning Jack a couple of times over the past few months. I remembered Mom and Dad saying he seemed like a really nice kid, saying they were glad August had already made a friend. "Sometimes kids are stupid," I said softly, holding his hand. I'm sure he didn't mean that. "Then why did he say it? He's been pretending to be my friend all along. Tishman probably bribed him with good grades or something. I bet he was like, 'Hey, Jack, if you make friends with the freak, you don't have to take any tests.' You know that's not true, and don't call yourself a freak. Whatever. I wish I'd never gone to school in the first place. But I thought you were liking it. I hate it." He was angry all of a sudden, punching his pillow. "I hate it, I hate it, I hate it." He was shrieking at the top of his lungs. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. He was hurt. He was mad. I let him have a few more minutes of his fury. Daisy started licking the tears off of his face. "Come on, Augie," I said, patting his back. "Why don't you put on your Jango Fett costume and—" "It's a Boba Fett costume. Why do you keep mixing it up?" "Boba Fett costume," I said, trying to stay calm. Put my arm around his shoulders. "Let's just go to the parade." "If I go to the parade, Mom will think I'm better and she will make me go to school." "Mom will never make you go to school," I answered. "Come on, Augie, let's go. It'll be fun. And I'll let you have all my candy." He didn't argue. He got out of bed and slowly started putting on his Boba Fett costume. I helped him adjust the straps and tighten the belt. By the time he put his helmet on, I could tell he was feeling better. Page 114, Time to Think. August played up the stomachache the next day so he didn't have to go to school. I admit I felt a little bad for Mom, who was genuinely concerned that he had a stomach bug, but I had promised August I wouldn't tell her about the incident at school. By Sunday, he was still determined not to go back to school. "What are you planning on telling Mom and Dad?" I asked him when he told me this. "They said I could quit whenever I wanted to," he said, all the while still focused on the comic book he was reading. "But you've never been the kind of kid who quits things," I said. "That's not like you." "I'm quitting." "You're going to have to tell Mom and Dad why," I pointed out, pulling the comic out of his hand so he'd have to look up at me while we were talking. "Then Mom will call the school and everyone will know about it." "Will Jack get in trouble?" I Would think so. Good. I have to admit, August was surprising me more and more. He pulled another comic book off his shelf and started leafing through it. Augie, I said, are you really going to let a couple of stupid kids keep you from going back to school? I know you've been enjoying it. Don't give them that power over you. Don't give them the satisfaction. They have no idea I even heard them, he explained. No, I know. Thea, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. I've made up my mind. But this is crazy, Augie, I said empathetically, pulling the new comic book away from him, too. You have to go back to school. Everyone hates school sometimes. I hate school sometimes. I hate my friends sometimes. That's just life, Augie. Do people go out of their way to avoid touching you, Via? He answered, which left me momentarily without an answer. Yeah, that's what I thought. So don't compare your bad days at school to mine, okay? Okay, that's fair. But it's not a contest about whose days are worst, Augie. The point is we all have to put up with bad days. Now, unless you want to be treated like a baby the rest of your life or like a kid with special needs, you're just going to have to suck it up and go. He didn't say anything, but I think the last bit was getting to him. You don't have to say a word to those kids, I continued. August, actually it's so cool that you know what they said, but they don't know what you said. You know what I mean? What? You know what I mean. You don't have to talk to them ever again if you don't want, and they'll never know why. See? Or you can pretend to be friends with them, but deep down inside, you know you're not. Is that how you are with Miranda? No. I never fake my feelings with Miranda. So why are you saying I should? I'm not. I'm just saying you shouldn't let those jerks get to you. That's all. Like Miranda got to you. Why do you keep bringing Miranda up? I yelled. I'm trying to talk to you about your friends. Please keep mine out of it. You're not even friends with her anymore. What does that have to do with what we're talking about? The way August was looking at me reminded me of a doll's face. He was just staring blankly at me with half closed eyes. She called the other day, he said finally. What? You didn't tell me? She wasn't calling you, he answered. She was calling me just to say hi, to see how I was doing. She didn't even know I was going to real school now. I can't believe you hadn't told her. She said the two of you don't hang out much more, but she knows. She wanted me to know she'd always loved me like a big sister. Why didn't you tell me? I said. I don't know. Well, I'm telling mom and dad about Jack Will if you stop going to school. Tushman will probably call you into the school and make Jack and all those other kids apologize to you in front of everyone. And everyone will treat you like a kid who shouldn't be going to school for a kid with special needs. Is that what you want? Because that's what's going to happen. Otherwise, just go back to school and act like nothing happened. Or if you want to confront Jack, fine. But either way, fine. He interrupted. Fine. Fine, I'll go back. Just stop talking. Can I just read my book already? Fine, I answered, turning to leave his room. I thought of something. Did Miranda ask anything else about me? He looked up from the comic book and looked me right into the eyes. She told me to tell you she misses you, quote unquote. I nodded. Thanks, I said casually, too embarrassed to let him see how happy that made me feel. All right, we're going to pause right there, my friends. If you are watching on YouTube, come to class Wednesday so you can read and hear what happens next.